This video is brought to you by Policy Genius, and I'll share with you more about them in just a minute.
How does food affect our brain? Well, I wrote a book about 13 years ago called The Ultra Mind Solution about how the body affects the mind. We often know about the mind-body effect, which is real, but there's also the other direction going on. And it turns out that food is probably the biggest driver of dysfunction in the brain when it comes to mood, behavior, attention, memory. And this is not just sort of hypothetical, but there's a whole department, for example, at Harvard of nutritional psychiatry. There's a whole department at Stanford of metabolic psychiatry. I've had both of them on my podcast, The Doctor's Pharmacy. The doctors from those institutions are talking about the role of food and the brain and the mood. And we see depression, anxiety, irritability, stress. It turns out that when you eat the American diet, or otherwise known as the SAD diet, the standard American diet, that people are damaging their brains in ways that create inflammation in the brain. And we now know that mental illness often is an inflamed brain. You know, when you cut yourself and you get an infection, it's red and hot and sore and inflamed. If you sprain your ankle, it's sore. If you get a sore throat, it's sore and red. When your brain is inflamed, it doesn't hurt. The only way your brain knows how to say ouch is by getting depressed or anxious or angry or irritable or having even more serious consequences. And so the food that we're eating, predominantly the sugar and starch and processed ingredients, additives, the lack of good fats, the predominance of bad fats and refined oils, the nutrient depletion of our diet. I mean, 95% of us are deficient probably in omega-3 fats. 90+% of Americans are deficient in one or more nutrients at the minimum level to prevent deficiency, which all play a role in mood, like folate, magnesium is incredible for anxiety, iron, zinc, all these, vitamin D, all these play a role in the brain function. I mean, you hear about winter blues, that's because of lack of vitamin D. So we know about this intimate connection between food and mood and nutritional status and mood. And the clinical trials have been really staggering, showing that people who eat a whole foods diet and get rid of the junk actually can get rid of depression. I see panic attacks, anxiety disorders often caused by the food we're eating. Just an example, when you eat sugar or starch, your cortisol level goes up, which is the stress hormone. Your adrenaline goes up. So if you eat a bagel or a cookie, your body literally has the same reaction as if you're running from a saber-toothed tiger.
Wow.
and that can create anxiety.
Internally with the insulin spike. Yeah.
I mean, you could be totally fine and calm and take 5 deep breaths before your meal, but if you eat all that crap, your brain is going to feel it. Your body's going to feel it.
So what happens to the brain when you're eating a bagel or an ice cream cone or whatever it is, and it goes into your gut? Does it send signals to your brain, and then it starts to, what does that do? Is it inflame it in that moment? Does it take time to inflame something?
Yeah. So there's a whole cascade of things that happens when you eat mostly the starch and sugar. That's 60% of our diet, right? It's ultra processed food. Mm-hmm. It's the main ingredients of corn and flour and sugar that are in everything. And what happens is you get this spike in blood sugar, which then creates a spike in insulin. At the same time, you get an immediate spike in cortisol and adrenaline. That's the first phase of response. Of course, it affects your liver and screws up your cholesterol and all that. But what happens next is even more concerning. It drives all the available fuel in your bloodstream from all the food you've eaten, sugar and starch and whatever bad fats, it drives it into your fat cells. And it's a one-way street into your fat cells called your adipocytes around your belly, those belly fat cells. Those fat cells, in turn, create a whole series of chemicals, like hundreds of chemicals, hormones, inflammatory markers and messengers, neurotransmitters. It's quite striking when you look at, they're not just like holding up your pants, it's fat there. It's like, it's actually doing stuff. And when you eat in that way, it drives hunger, it stores fat, it shuts down your metabolism, and it literally slows your metabolism. And even worse, it locks the fat cells so that fat can't get out. It's like a one-way turnstile, only can get in. And then on top of that, it releases all these inflammatory messenger molecules. We call them adipocytokines. They go to your brain and they create inflammation in the brain. So it's a kind of a downstream effect of our chronic eating this way. If you have one cookie or one bagel, it's not going to kill you, right? But if you're constantly eating this stuff, and we're talking about the average American eats a pound, almost, of flour and sugar a day.
Wow.
A pound. Like 152 pounds of sugar and 133 pounds of flour. You add that up and And I know I'm not eating that much and you aren't. So a lot of people are making up for the difference.
Right. So food affects your mood for sure.
Yeah. And not even that. It's not even just, what it was striking. And I don't know if you had David Perlmutter on the show, but he wrote a book called Brainwash. And it really speaks to what happens to the brain when you don't eat real whole foods and you eat too much of this American diet that we're all eating. It disconnects the frontal lobe from the amygdala. Now, what does that mean in English? The frontal lobe is the grown-up. It's the adult in the room. It's like you think you're going to punch that guy, but you go, I better not punch that guy, right? It's that adult in the room that sort of is your higher self. And the amygdala is your reptile brain. It's your lizard brain. It's going to just run or fight or flee. And what happens is literally physiologically, these parts of the brain are connected. But when you eat crap, they get disconnected. And so you're constantly reacting from your amygdala with no grown-up in the room.
This is a quick reminder that life can change at any second. And I've seen this happen so many times in my life, whether it's been a happy and exciting change or a change that tested my strength and perseverance. Now, either way, these changes have shown me that sometimes things happen that we just can't control. But what we can control is how we prepare and how we react to situations. And I'm well aware that something could happen to me at any moment, which is why it's so important for me to know that if some unfortunate event did occur right now, my loved ones would be covered. If there's someone who relies on you for financial support, whether it's a child, an aging parent, or even a business partner, you need life insurance. And luckily, Policy Genius, the sponsor of this video, makes it easy to compare quotes from over a dozen top insurers all in one place. And you could save $1,300 or more per year on life insurance by using Policy Genius to compare policies. And getting started is super easy. First, head right over to policygenius.com/Lewis Howes. In minutes, you can work out how much life insurance coverage you need and compare personalized quotes to find your best price. And once you're ready to apply, the Policy Genius team will handle the paperwork and scheduling all for free. The licensed experts at Policy Genius work for you, not the insurance companies, so you can trust them to help you navigate every step of the shopping and buying process. Head to policygenius.com/Lewis Howes to get started right now. Policy Genius. When it comes to insurance, it's nice to get it right.
Which is why we see this level of divisiveness and hatred. And I mean, just all the upheaval we're seeing in society now. I think a large part of that has to do with our brains being constantly triggered by this reptilian insult that is driving behavior change. And when we look at the fact of other data to support, it's not just a theory. In prisons, if you give prisoners healthy food, swapping out all the crap they eat in prisons, which is pretty darn bad, there's a 56% reduction in violent crime in the prisons. If you add a multivitamin, it's an 80% reduction.
Come on.
If you look at kids, and this is in juvenile detention centers, we've done clinical trials because these got these people locked up. So it's a really great kind of study. Now, these kind of studies are hard to do because mostly we call them free living humans who don't really behave and they'll do whatever they want. They don't follow the study protocol. When you're locked up, you get what you get, right? And so they took these kids.
The environment's the same for everyone. Yeah, all that stuff.
That's right. And they took these kids and these were kids who were disruptive, violent, aggressive, oppositional, suicidal. It was by cleaning up their diet and giving them whole foods. There was a 91% reduction in all violent behavior. Oppositional behavior, need for restraints went down. Suicide went down 100%. I mean, it's the third leading cause of death in that age group. It went down 100%. No suicides. And so you see this incredible data that comes from understanding nutritional psychiatry. And you go, wait a minute, maybe some of our messed up society has to do with not only the problems with obesity and the problems with chronic disease and the fact that COVID is landed on a perfect, laboratory for spreading in America because we're all so unhealthy and our immune systems are so sick because of our diet. But it's also led to this incredible disruption of our brain and our mood and our behavior, which we're seeing rampant in society today.
What would you say are the 3 foods we should all stay away from in order to increase the happiness of our mental health?
Oh, that's not hard. So, in my book, The Pegan Diet, it's called 21 Practical Principles for Reclaiming Your Health in a Nutritionally Confusing World. and it's really practical. And there's a bunch of steps at the end. But I think, the real dangers are, one, high fructose corn syrup. Because anything with high fructose corn syrup, almost by definition, is a highly processed food that comes with all kinds of other bad crap. So if you're reading labels, like if you just can eliminate that, that would be like number one. Number two would be trans fats, hydrogenated fats, which...
What is that? What's that in? What foods is that in? Is that processed packaged foods?
What,
is that
hydrogenated fats?
Is that fried? Is that French fries? Yeah.
So hydrogenated fats have literally been banned by the FDA, essentially ruled not safe to eat, but they're still out there. Okay, you can still find them. It's less, but and they used to be really. It makes Crisco shortening. So anything that comes with a baked good or any processed food. And the third thing would be, you should only eat foods with ingredients that you would have in your cupboard, can pronounce and recognize. In other words, would you have butylated hydroxytoluene in your cupboard that you sprinkle on your salad,
No.
Which is also known as BHT. It's a preservative that's been linked to cancer. It's banned in Europe. We have it in everything here. So if you wouldn't have, azodicarbonamide in your cupboard that you would use in your stir fries, you probably shouldn't eat it. And yet this is in so much of our foods. In fact, in America, it's legal. This is an ingredient that's used in breads to make them fluffier. Subway used it in their Subway sandwich.
Didn't they have to take it out? Didn't Vari get it taken out?
Yeah. So our friend shamed them into taking it out, but it's still legal here. It's not illegal. She just shamed them publicly by trying to eat her yoga mat in front of the Subway and got them. But in Singapore, for example, if you're a food manufacturer and you use this ingredient in your food, you get a 15-year jail sentence and a $450,000
No,
fine.
you do not.
Yes, you do.
That's
I swear to God. In Europe, a lot of these chemicals are banned. So basically, just eat real food. So get rid of all those three things that would make you likely to end up in trouble. And then, there's another hierarchy of how do you even upgrade the quality. But the whole principle of the Pegan diet is that, one, food is medicine. Food is medicine, and quality matters. And then it's not just calories. It's information, and it literally can upgrade or downgrade your biology with every bite. And so when you're putting something in your mouth, you're literally speaking to your genes. You're speaking to your hormones, your brain chemistry, your immune system, your microbiome, your mitochondria. Everything is controlled by what we're eating. So the book is really focused on two key principles. One is food is medicine, and the other is personalized nutrition and medicine. Because, I call it the Pegan diet as a joke between paleo and keto, right?
Sure.
And I was sitting on a panel with a friend of mine who was a vegan cardiologist, and another one was a paleo doc, and they were just fighting. And I was in the middle, and I felt like a ping pong ball going back and forth. And I was like trying to break the tension a little bit. And I said, hey, if you're a paleo and you're vegan, I must be Pegan. And it was kind of a joke, and everybody laughed. And I was like, whoa, wow, that was good. And then I thought about it on the way home, and basically they're identical except for where you get your protein, animals or grains and beans. They both agree that we should eat whole foods. They both agree we should eat lots of vegetables and nuts and seeds and good fats and get rid of processed foods and low sugar. And even agree that we should not be eating dairy, which is a whole controversial subject, but they're pretty identical.
Sure.
And so the goal of this book is not to create a dogma, but to create a Big Ten inclusive framework for people to think about food in a different way. So what are the principles of healthy eating that are adaptable to different cultures, different preferences, different belief systems? And I think, I always encourage people to listen to their body, not to dogma. A lot of our nutrition advice is based on, be keto or be paleo or be vegan or be this or be that, be raw. And the truth is, it depends on you. If I do keto, my body doesn't respond great. I mean, I do higher fat, but another person who's a diabetic, they might do great on it.
Right.
One person on a vegan diet, like Rich Roll, may be able to run triathlons. I mean, just incredible Ironman stunts of heroic effort, but he may be a unicorn, or maybe he's figured out how to do it. And another patients of mine are extremely ill after years of being a vegan because of their nutrition depleted, or they don't have protein, or their body doesn't like it. I just had a patient, for example, this week who was a young woman, 26 years old, who's been a vegetarian vegan. She was basically a vegetable and sugar vegan. And she didn't even like to...
So she would eat sugar as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, a lot of people who are vegan eat sugar because the body starts to crave the carbohydrates and sugar. So it's not uncommon. And so she wasn't overweight at all, but metabolically, she was super unhealthy. She had, acne, and her gut was a mess, and she had very low protein, like very, very low amino acids. She had very low vitamin D, extremely low B12, very low iodine, very low zinc. I mean, she was extremely unwell, and her diet was just so not fit for her. So we had to sort of upregulate it and change it a little bit. I had to get her on some different protein shakes, which she needed. I had to upregulate her vitamins. I had to sort of get her off the sugar. I mean, but I think, it takes a lot of work. So the key is, how do you personalize the diet and get away from the basically religious nutrition that we
which is either all vegan, vegetarian, keto, or carnivore. Right. There's all these extreme diets, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And again, I always encourage people to listen to the smartest doctor in the room, which is their own body.
Yourself.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, how do you feel? Do you feel great? Do you feel bad? How's your stomach? How's your head? How you're clear? Are you have energy? What is happening to you? So I think it's important to understand that we are all different, and that the future of medicine is personalized medicine. There's a whole section here on personalized nutrition and how do you identify your particular needs by various kinds of testing, whether it's genetic testing, whether it's metabolic testing, food sensitivity testing, and how do you actually figure out how to dial in your perfect diet.
Everyone's kind of swearing by their way is the way, but it seems so extreme in my mind, and I empathize with vegans, and I'm like, I don't want to hurt animals either, and but then I've tried it for a while, and I'm also like, gosh, but I miss meat. And it's like, what is the way? And what I'm hearing you say is that there is not one size fits all. You have to really figure out what works for you.
Yeah. The one size that fits all is quality, is understanding food as information. Just meat, for example. So feedlot meat is an abomination. It's horribly cruel to the animals. It grows the animals in ways that are extremely destructive to the environment by these monocrop corn and soy fields we use to grow feed, the feedlots that produce tremendous amounts of pollution, all the hormones and antibiotics that we use, and the quality of the meat is very different. And so it's basically bad for you, bad for the planet, and bad for the animals. So they should be banned, 100%.
Yeah. What would you say are the three things you would keep doing for as long as you could to help you with anti-aging and living longer and staying? Would it be the peptides? Would it be something else?
I listen. I think it's like those are like, there's the 80 and that's the 20. So that's the 20 is all that fancy stuff, and the 80 is
food.
Your food,
sleep,
and exercise. And I've been doing more strength training, and I've been doing more cardio, and I think sleep and meditation. And then the other thing that people often don't think about for longevity is community, love, because love is medicine, just like food is medicine.
Absolutely. And I think stress in your heart, you're going to die. It's going to make you sick.
It's really true. And what's really striking is when you look at the data, some of the most potent predictors of longevity is not your diet, actually. It's whether you are socially connected. Mm-hmm. So if you're part of a knitting club or a bridge club or a bowling club, like the longevity numbers just go crazy. And there's a great study that was done years ago in a little town I think it's called Rosario, what was it? Rose something, Pennsylvania. And it was basically in a community of Italians from this one little village in Italy that all kind of moved over to this one town years and years ago. And they kind of left their old Italian diet behind and adopted the American diet. But this community was so tightly knit, and there are all different economic spectrums in the community, but they were always there for each other. They would eat birthdays and parties and holidays. There was a sense of connection and love in the community. It was really unique. And what was striking is, even though they adopted all the American lifestyle habits, they didn't get the same mortality as the rest of Americans, because they had this incredible social fabric that was providing them a foundation of love and connection and meaning and purpose. And what's striking is, I just saw an article, even in one of the major medical journals, the Journal of the American Medical Association, that was striking to me because it was so clear that meaning and purpose are also predictive of longevity. So if you have no meaning and purpose in your life,
what's the point of being here? I might as well end it.
Right, you kind of have nothing to live for, right? So I think it's really quite interesting, and I think we're in this just moment where we're learning so much about medicine and well-being and health, and we are in a massive paradigm shift. That's what functional medicine is. That's what this book is about, The Pegan Diet. It's really a functional medicine view on food and nutrition and health and longevity.
You talked about insulin resistance as one of the leading causes of chronic disease today. What is insulin resistance? How do we prevent it? And then how do we treat it?
Yes. Well, great question. And I think we hinted about it a little bit before, but 88% of Americans are in poor metabolic health, right? That's staggering. That's almost 9 out of 10 of us. And that is, poor metabolic health means insulin resistance. And I'm going to unpack that in a minute. 75% are overweight, 42% are obese, 40% of kids are overweight. I mean, it's terrible. 1 in 2 Americans has prediabetes or type 2 diabetes. All this is caused by the amount of starch and sugar in our diet, right? Broccoli is a carbohydrate. That's fine to eat. But white flour is also a carbohydrate. It's worse than sugar in your body. So the volume of starch and sugar, this predominantly our calories, is driving this poor metabolic health. And what happens when you eat starch and sugar, which, by the way, we really didn't have, right, for most of our human history. We basically were hunters and gatherers till 10,000 years ago. And then, if we had grains, we had whole grains. The milling of flour didn't happen till about 150 years ago. And when that started and they started to actually refine the flour is when we saw these nutritional deficiencies like like beriberi and pellagra and these horrible vitamin deficiencies. It was really terrible. And they actually, they actually discovered vitamins because they started depleting the food. So when we eat in a way that has all this starch and sugar, it causes our blood sugar to go up. That causes our insulin to respond to try to keep the blood sugar down. So you can have normal blood sugar if you go to your doctor. You can have a normal A1C, which is your average blood sugar. But if your insulin's high, you're in big trouble. I saw a guy who was 400 pounds. His blood sugar was perfect. His average blood sugar was perfect. His insulin was like 20 times normal because it was keeping everything down.
Oh, man.
Now, insulin gets that high because the body becomes resistant to the effects of the insulin. It's like the boy who cried wolf. So you need more and more and more insulin to get the blood sugar down. More and more insulin. What does that do? Well, insulin has a number of roles. In a small amount, it's good, keeps your blood sugar good. If you're healthy, fine. If you have no insulin, you get type 1 diabetes, you need insulin shots. But most people have what we call type 2 or prediabetes or insulin resistance. And it turns out that this is the driver of cancer, like the most common cancers: prostate, breast, colon cancer, pancreatic cancer. Heart disease, most heart attacks are caused by this. Diabetes, obviously. Dementia, they're calling type 3 diabetes, depression. So many issues are driven by this insulin resistance that are burdening our society with chronic disease, which affects 6 out of 10 people. And so when you have this phenomenon in your body, it drives inflammation. It drives fat storage in your belly. It causes more hunger. It slows down your ability to lose weight. And it creates this vicious cycle of muscle loss and fat gain that it's like super fuel on the aging process. That's why you see diabetics, have, far more heart attacks. They're 4 times the risk of dementia. They're more likely to get cancer. It's just all related to this phenomena. And if you're talking about the game of longevity, I remember this lecture I heard like 20 plus years ago from a Harvard professor who was talking about, preventive cardiology. He said, Mark, if you could take a group of 100-year-old people who have perfectly clean arteries, they'd have one thing in common. I said, what's that? He says they're insulin sensitive, meaning they are able to easily regulate their blood sugar with very minimal amounts of insulin. But most of us, because they're basically healthy or they have genetics that help them or they eat, well. But the key is to the game of aging is to keep your insulin low, right? And if you keep your insulin low, you're going to be activating all these anti-aging mechanisms in your body. If your insulin's high, you're going to accelerate all the aging. So that's why starch and sugar are poison.
When insulin is high, it's weakening immune system. It's increasing inflammation, which is making you age faster, essentially, and get sick, right?
Yes. And not only that, Lewis, what is happening now with COVID in America? Why are we the worst country in the world with COVID? It's not just political mismanagement. The fact is that we were the sitting duck perfect place for COVID to land and cause havoc. Why?
Because we're obese.
Because we're obese, we're overweight, we have chronic diseases, and these are all diseases of inflammation. So we are pre-inflamed. And when COVID hits, it's like gas on the fire, right? It just blows up your immune system, which is why you see these cytokine storms and this overwhelming inflammation in the body. It's not the virus that kills people. It's people's own bodies overactive inflammation because it's primed because of our inflammatory diet. And so nobody's talking about this. I think Bill Maher is the only one I've seen talking about it in the media, who says, hey guys, the thing we can do, yes, maybe we need to be protecting ourselves and practicing social distancing, maybe getting vaccines. That's a whole rabbit hole we shouldn't go down. But nobody's talking about
getting healthy,
our diet,
yeah.
or losing weight, or immunorejuvenation, or even things like vitamin D, which are so cheap and simple. I mean, if I were president, I would literally give free dose of vitamin D to every man, woman, and child in America. Just boom. Give it to them.
There's a lot of research showing that vitamin D is defending the body against COVID, right?
Yeah, if your vitamin D is low, you're 80% more likely to end up in the hospital and die. If your vitamin D is high, you're 94% less likely to end up in the hospital or in the ICU. 94%. Right. That's better than vaccines, right? With a lot less hassle and risk and side effects.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So how do we treat it then? What are the things that we need to do when our insulin is high?
Well, guess what? I wrote a book. It's a really good book. It's called The Pegan Diet, yes. And it helps you do that. And essentially the principles are, things that I'm almost embarrassed, Louis, that I have my career telling people to do stuff that's so self-evident, right? Like eat real food.
We all know, yeah.
Eat real food. Don't eat crap. Eat lots of vegetables. Eat lots of good fats. Get good quality protein. It's not that hard. It's like a quadruple threat for your body to gain weight. It goes back to what we're growing, right? So why are we eating all this food? It's because that's the food we produce, right? And so that's the other part of the problem. So we have the chronic disease, we have the economic impact, and then we're like, well,